My sister, let's call her Miranda, has always been a source of stress for me. We never got along. She's quite manipulative and tends to display narcissistic traits. The thing is, Miranda was born prematurely, which caused my parents excessive worry and care for her. Unfortunately, because of this, I often felt neglected. My parents would miss my school plays or basketball games and even forgot to pick me up from events. A particularly painful issue was always birthday gifts. For Miranda, my parents gave thoughtful, sweet things that made her happy. For me, I got books or teddy bears that I didn't even like. It was a constant reminder that my own sister overshadowed me. Dealing with my parents' unfairness was tough, but my sister took it to another level, reveling in their favoritism and using it against me. For example, once she tore up my dress while I was sleeping, just because a guy she liked asked me out instead of her. I was horrified and couldn't hold back tears because I loved that dress. When I told my parents, they scolded her, but she immediately played the victim, crying and claiming the guy liked her first, and that I was deliberately doing this because I hated her. To my horror, my parents felt sorry for her after her dramatic story and advised me to avoid guys she liked to spare her feelings. It was terribly unfair because it wasn't my fault that the guy paid attention to me. Another incident happened when I begged my parents to go to Six Flags amusement park for my birthday. However, Miranda found out and decided she wanted to go to Six Flags for her birthday too. Since her birthday was before mine, my parents agreed to her request. She didn't even ride half the attractions, and I knew she chose that place just to spite me. In the end, for my birthday, my parents just took me to a restaurant we always went to. I was very upset, but they told me there was no point in going to Six Flags twice in 1 year. As we got older, Miranda treated me even worse. She constantly made backhanded compliments like, "Your face looks better with glasses," or "You like that boy, I thought you were into girls." In my teenage years, I always tried not to stand out. Unlike me, Miranda was everyone's favorite. In public, she seemed kind and helpful, but in private, she became my worst nightmare. Sometimes she acted nice, but only when she needed something from me. Once she got what she wanted, she'd ignore or mock me again. Miranda made me feel insecure not only about my appearance, but also about the guys I dated. When I was 17, I got my first boyfriend, but Miranda managed to plant doubts in my mind about him. She said he was too handsome for me and would soon dump me anyway, so I'd better break up with him first. Whenever my boyfriend came over, Miranda would flirt with him, standing too close, touching his hands, laughing loudly and unnaturally. Of course, it made him uncomfortable. A few months after Miranda thoroughly instilled her doubts in me, I decided to break up with him. Looking back now, I realize I was wrong. He seemed like a genuinely good person. After high school, I moved to another state to study engineering in college. During holidays, I returned home, and Miranda's subtle mocking comments awaited me again. The toxic atmosphere hadn't gone anywhere. At 25, Miranda met her future husband, Dave, and 2 years later, they decided to get married. She announced her engagement, which surprised everyone since we knew she was simultaneously dating other guys. Nevertheless, we were glad she finally decided to settle down with a decent person. Either way, Miranda decided to make me her maid of honor at the wedding. My parents were thrilled that I'd be part of the event, but I felt the exact opposite. I knew the role of maid of honor wouldn't be easy, and I was right. Miranda constantly used this role to control and manipulate me. She regularly threatened to demote me or strip me of the maid of honor role if I did anything not to her liking. This made the entire wedding planning process extremely stressful. When she asked for my opinion, I always answered honestly, but every time she got angry, blamed me for everything and threw tantrums. Because of her aggressive reactions, I started staying silent to avoid accidentally saying something that could trigger another conflict. I just couldn't take her verbal abuse anymore and preferred to maintain the appearance of peace. Once over lunch, we were discussing wedding plans, and I simply asked if the maid of honor would have a special dress. just to better understand her vision. Miranda immediately started yelling, accusing me of wanting to be the center of attention. Then the conversation turned to accommodations for guests. My mom said it would be nice to book an Airbnb in advance, and I agreed. That's when my sister exploded and declared that she had already discussed it with her fiance, and they would book hotel rooms. She kept yelling at me, accusing me of lacking intelligence, and saying I should consult her first before agreeing with anyone's suggestions because I was her maid of honor and essentially worked for her. I stayed silent, trying not to escalate the situation. Then she started accusing me of being negative and in a bad mood. My mom tried to intervene, but my sister interrupted her and declared she was tired of dealing with an immature maid of honor like me, and that I needed to grow up. At that point, I just stayed quiet and waited for her to stop yelling. In the end, she decided it was time for us to go home, her to her apartment, and me back to mine. As we approached the car, she kept yelling at me for another 10 minutes in the parking lot, repeating the same things. At that moment, all I wanted was to escape somewhere far away, but my car was a 20-minute walk, so Miranda had to drive me. Finally, the wedding day arrived. The ceremony itself went relatively well. However, even there, Miranda found reasons to pick fights with me over the most trivial things. During the reception, she openly yelled at me in front of everyone, making the atmosphere tense and unpleasant. I noticed her angry glares between activities. Either she didn't like the music chosen, or thought the waiters were serving drinks incorrectly. When it was my turn to give a speech, I stood up hoping to say something warm and sincere, but Miranda gestured for me to hurry up and finish. Later, she accused me of mentioning her childhood in my speech, and deliberately trying to portray her in a bad light in front of her new family. I was devastated because everyone else seemed to like my speech. Even my parents had no complaints. The next morning, when the chaos subsided, I realized how intense the anxiety I had been living with for months was, and the cause was none other than Miranda. I finally understood that she had always been my biggest problem throughout my life. It's a pity I didn't have the courage back then to refuse to participate in that wedding, but I knew my family would have blamed me. When that nightmare ended, I could finally fully dedicate myself to my career. A few months later, I met my current boyfriend, Tom. We started dating, and a year later decided to move in together. My parents were happy for us. However, my sister expressed her dissatisfaction, saying Tom looked too nerdy and was just an ordinary computer geek. In reality, Tom worked in IT and earned 3 times more than me. Miranda didn't know that, and I didn't care. I was happy with him, and my sister's opinion didn't matter to me. One day, my life changed abruptly when at a family dinner, my sister announced she was pregnant. If you're wondering how this affected me right after that, she said she couldn't wait to see me become an aunt, because she'd really need my help during this difficult period. Her words shocked me. She was an adult about to have a child, but instead of asking for help from her husband or our parents, she somehow decided I should be the one to babysit her child. You see, I've never had kids in my life and have no experience dealing with them. I've always felt uncomfortable around children and had no desire to interact with them. I was perfectly fine with not having kids yet, so her words really scared me. At that moment, I felt cornered. I knew my sister would find a way to make me babysit her child, especially since I work remotely, and it would be convenient for her to drop the kid off at my place anytime. My sister didn't know boundaries. Whenever I tried to set any limits, my parents immediately rushed to defend her. When my sister had her first child, I occasionally looked after him. At first, it wasn't too bothersome because her husband worked the night shift, and my sister worked during the day, so I just needed to let her husband get some sleep. I was never completely alone with the child, and I started babysitting when he was already 6 months old, which was a bit easier. Unfortunately, over time, these instances stopped being rare. I was asked to babysit more and more often, and my sister constantly criticized my caregiving methods. I could be calmly working when suddenly I'd get a call from my sister or mom asking about my weekend plans. If I said I had no plans, they'd simply inform me I was going to my sister's to give her a break. That was the end of the conversation. Because of these requests, I gradually started feeling like I had a second job one that, by the way, I wasn't paid for. You'd expect my sister to at least be grateful for my help, but no, that didn't happen. Every time I returned home, she'd call our mom and complain that I did something wrong, changed a diaper incorrectly, or fed the child improperly. She nitpicked over trivial things which infuriated me because I was already doing her a favor. Now you understand how manipulative she was. My sister and I were clearly not close, and she should have been grateful that I was helping her at all. Instead, she smiled to my face, but behind my back only worsened our relationship. Eventually, I got really angry. This started affecting my mental health, and Tom noticed it too. One evening, we had an honest conversation, and I poured everything out. He convinced me to finally stand up to my family. The next time they called asking me to babysit, I flat out refused. Miranda and my mom started calling and begging me to do it for the family, but I stood my ground and told them to go to hell. I felt I had already done more than I should and didn't want anything more to do with my sister or her child. I stopped all contact with my sister. She came to my house when I didn't answer calls, but I refused to open the door. My parents also tried to make me forgive her, but they eventually gave up, realizing I wouldn't budge. I occasionally talked to my parents, but that was it. That went on for 2 years. During that time, Miranda had a second child with Dave. Last year, my mom called and told me that Miranda and Dave were getting divorced. It was quite unexpected. Although I didn't want anything to do with my sister, the news still surprised me. When I asked my mom for details, it turned out Miranda had been sleeping with her coworkers. Apparently, Dave found intimate messages on a second phone she always hid from him. He gathered evidence and filed for divorce. It caught Miranda completely off guard because Dave served her the divorce papers right away. When she tried to justify herself, he said he knew everything. She begged him to forgive her, but he left. I was shocked by this turn of events, though. Looking back now, I realized Dave was too good for her. So in a way, I'm glad he escaped that nightmare. After the divorce, Miranda had to move back in with our parents. I heard complaints from them that she partied all night and came home drunk in the mornings, reeking of alcohol. Eventually, she was fired from her job because she was constantly late. This made her drink even more. While she was out having fun, my parents were forced to take care of her children. This went on for months. Meanwhile, my life was going wonderfully. Tom and I got a dog, bought a house, and gradually moved in. We're discussing marriage, but aren't in a rush. We're confident we'll always be together, so we're just enjoying the moment. When we had a housewarming party, I had to invite my parents. Unfortunately, without my knowledge, they also brought my sister and her kids. Seeing her, I got angry but didn't want to cause a scene in front of the guests, so I stayed silent. Tom greeted them warmly and offered drinks while I glared at my parents in frustration. My dad approached me and awkwardly said he didn't want to bring Miranda, but my mom hoped we'd reconcile and thought this was the perfect moment. My sister loudly told her kids to go hug me because I was their aunt. I forced a smile as they hugged me. Then Miranda started lecturing me that I should be a more involved aunt since the kids barely knew me, and I should make more effort. I clenched my teeth to avoid saying something that would embarrass her in front of everyone. During the party, I noticed Miranda was constantly drinking wine and completely ignoring her kids. Her children were behaving terribly, chasing our dog, trying to kick it or pull its tail. They tried to sneak into our bedroom, which I had locked to keep guests out, and even managed to break a vase while playing. I was on the verge of exploding and kept looking at Miranda, expecting her to say something to her kids, but she didn't care at all. She laughed and drank carefree. When the guests wanted to tour the house, Miranda joined them. I showed everyone the rooms, and when we went out to the backyard, Miranda loudly declared that such a big house was too much for two people, and started asking loudly if I was planning to have kids. This immediately drew the attention of the other guests who looked at me curiously. I sharply shut her down, saying it was none of her business. But Miranda quickly replied that my life decisions were the whole family's business, especially since I was an aunt. My irritation was growing, but I held myself together in front of the guests. The more she drank, the more provocative her behavior became. Miranda started making inappropriate comments about my relationship with Tom, saying we were wasting time not getting married and not having kids. I felt the tension in the room, but decided to ignore her comments. Later that evening, when most of the guests had left, I decided it was time to address the situation. I pulled Miranda aside and expressed my dissatisfaction with her behavior, especially given our complicated history. As expected, Miranda took it badly. She accused me of being arrogant and ungrateful, reminding me how much time I supposedly owed her for letting me babysit her kids. My parents tried to mediate the conflict. My mom, as usual, started urging me to forgive Miranda. However, I stood my ground and asked them all to leave. After that incident, I decided I never wanted to see my sister again, or have anything to do with my mother, who constantly supported her. It seemed to me that if I stopped communicating with them, everything would get better. But yesterday morning, there was an unexpected knock at the door. When I opened it, I saw Miranda. She had a desperate look on her face. She hurriedly explained that she had a serious problem and urgently needed my help. According to her, there was an emergency at work and she had no one else who could look after her kids. She begged me to watch them for just a few hours. I looked at the kids. They were sleepy and exhausted, and it pained me to think she woke them up so early just to bring them to me. I asked why she didn't ask our parents. Miranda said they were at our aunt's house. She even said I could check, which I did later, of course. When I suggested she ask her ex-husband, she said he was sleeping and not answering because he worked the night shift. So according to her, I was her last hope. Reluctantly, I agreed to watch the kids, and she left satisfied. Closing the door behind her, I felt both irritation and pity. I was amazed at Miranda's audacity, just dropping her kids off at my place, without warning, not considering my own plans. Despite my resentment, I decided to do my best to make the kids comfortable. We played, watched cartoons, and I even tried to engage them in drawing and other simple activities. Surprisingly, they calmed down quickly once we got to know each other better, and over time, I even started enjoying their company. By lunchtime, I realized I had no idea if the kids had any food allergies, and decided not to risk it and check with Miranda. I called her hoping for a quick answer, but she didn't pick up. I tried again, and it went to voicemail. Then I decided to ask the kids directly. I gently explained that their mom seemed very busy at work and wasn't answering calls, and carefully asked if they had any allergies or disliked any foods. The older girl, talking about food preferences, suddenly let slip that maybe her mom wasn't answering because she was busy at a wedding. I frowned and asked how she knew that. The girl hesitated and admitted she overheard Miranda discussing it with a friend on the way to my place. The pieces came together and a wave of anger washed over me. I thanked the kids for their honesty and reassured them everything was fine. Right after that, I called my parents to get to the bottom of it. After a long argument, my mom finally admitted that Miranda had indeed gone to a wedding where kids weren't allowed. She went with her new boyfriend, who didn't even know she was a mother of two. My mom tried to justify Miranda's actions, saying men don't like women with kids, so she decided to hide their existence. But I was furious because my sister had lied to me again and manipulated me, taking advantage of my willingness to help. Then I checked Miranda's social media to confirm this. On her Instagram, there were fresh stories from the wedding. She was smiling and drinking. I shook my head in disappointment. Browsing her Instagram, I realized there wasn't a single photo of her kids. My sister, a mother of two, was actively pretending to be single and childless, erasing her own children from her public life. Later, when Miranda came back for the kids, we had a huge fight. I made it clear I didn't want to be part of her deception and warned her that if she left her kids with me like that again, I'd contact social services. Miranda was furious hearing this and started insulting me. But then Tom, who had returned from work, stepped in. He threatened to call the police, after which she left immediately. After everything that happened, I feel drained and emotionally exhausted. I'm grateful that Tom is always on my side. However, my mom and aunt contacted me again, urging me to be more understanding of a single mother's struggles and insisting I should learn to help family in tough times. So before we move on to the update and find out what happened next, I suggest writing in the comments what you think about this story. Personally, I think the author is absolutely 100% right, and she's not obligated to look after her sister's kids. Even without considering all this toxic background with her sister and parents, she's not obligated to watch the kids if she doesn't want to, in my opinion. And with this background, there's really nothing to discuss. Yes, family relationships imply some kind of help, but it's mutual help, not one-sided. And covering it up with any kind of family unity is always manipulation. Now, let's find out how things develop further. Update 1. Thank you so much to everyone for the understanding and support. I received tons of messages from strangers asking if I was okay and sharing their own stories about toxic relatives similar to my sister. After reading the comments, I concluded that my mom is also acting extremely toxically, continuing to let my sister walk all over me. It's obvious she still favors Miranda, even though she's the main problem. I'm planning to have a serious talk with my mom. I called my aunt to hear her side of the story, and it turned out my mom hadn't told her the whole truth. So I had to do it for her. When my aunt learned that Miranda lied to me, made me watch her kids, and hid from her boyfriend that she's a mother of two, she apologized to me and promised to talk to my mom. I don't know what conversation they had, but soon my mom sent me a message reproaching me for not dragging my aunt into our personal matters and for portraying my sister in a bad light. I'm fed up with my mom making ridiculous excuses for Miranda's actions while never calling her out. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update. Despite my attempts to distance myself from Miranda, the tension in the family has only increased. My mom kept pressuring me to forgive Miranda and start participating in her life again, meaning babysitting her kids. She even started emotionally blackmailing me, saying that she and my dad are getting older, and soon Miranda will be my only family left. I decided to have an honest talk with my mom and asked her to meet me alone, warning her in advance not to bring up Miranda. She agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, and I hoped for an honest and calm conversation. Sitting at the table, I took a deep breath, preparing for a difficult talk. First, I said that I love her and my dad very much and want to maintain healthy relationships with them. I said I understood her concern about aging and the importance of family unity, but emphasized that my emotional well-being is just as important for maintaining normal relationships with her. I explained the enormous emotional damage Miranda's manipulations had caused me over the years, and why I needed to prioritize my mental health. My mom, clearly experiencing an internal conflict, listened as I gave examples of Miranda's toxic behavior since childhood and described how it affected my life. I shared my feelings about how often I was ignored, used, and manipulated. I hoped to convey the seriousness of the situation. Her face showed a range of emotions from guilt to realization. The conversation took an unexpected turn when, after a pause, my mom admitted that she was well aware of Miranda's manipulative nature, but chose to turn a blind eye to it for the sake of maintaining at least the appearance of family harmony. She explained that when Miranda was born prematurely, she had some health issues that terrified my mom, and she became overly protective of her. That's why she was blind to all her actions, simply grateful that her child was alive and healthy. And hearing this, I felt my heart breaking. I reminded her that I was her child too and needed her in childhood as well. I said it wasn't my fault that I was born healthy. I acknowledged how hard it must have been for her, but urged her to have an open talk with Miranda. Otherwise, her own children would resent her in the future just as I did. I emphasized that family problems can only be resolved if everyone acknowledges and discusses them openly. My mom nodded in understanding, which was a complete surprise because I didn't even hope she'd hear me. We discussed the importance of personal boundaries, and I explained to my mom that I needed personal space, so I decided to take a break from communicating with her for a while. My mom started begging me not to disappear for years, saying she loved me and regretted everything I had to go through. I assured her I didn't plan to disappear forever, but I really needed time. When my mom and I finally managed to clear things up, I felt much better. Later, my dad contacted me separately. He also acknowledged Miranda's manipulative nature and said he understood my decision. He admitted he regretted letting her behave that way for years and assured me he respected my desire to take care of my mental health. He said he was always ready to support me, which is probably the best thing a child can hear from a parent. I completely stopped contact with Miranda and even installed cameras at the front door so that if she tried something like that again, I'd have grounds to contact law enforcement. Update 3. It's been 4 months since my last update. The reason for my absence was that I decided to take a break from social media and deleted all the apps. My mental health has significantly improved. Plus, I started regularly seeing a therapist and actively working on personal growth. My relationship with Tom is still strong. Last month, he unexpectedly proposed to me during a romantic beach date. It was so sweet. He was nervous and slightly trembling when he got down on one knee and pulled out the ring. I still can't believe I'll be marrying such a wonderful person in a few months. I shared the news with my parents. Although we rarely talk, they're thrilled for me. They adore Tom. Recently, I learned that Miranda moved out of our parents' house after they finally lost patience with her constant late-night partying and coming home drunk in the mornings. She tried arguing with them, but in the end, she had no choice but to move out. My parents agreed to pay her rent for 6 months, but after that, she'll have to manage on her own. Dave pays her child support monthly, but I doubt that money will cover her personal expenses. I hope that at least for her kid's sake, she'll finally grow up and start acting responsibly. Well, that's all. I'm waiting for your opinions on the story in the comments. Personally, I think Miranda won't change and will continue her bad behavior. What about you? Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new videos if you haven't already. Watch our previous videos, which you'll see right here. And good luck to you.